The sun glinted off the sleek, crystalline hull of the Thrillin mothership as it descended through the Earth's atmosphere. Its design was elegant, almost ethereal, a stark contrast to the bulky machinery humans had sent into space over the decade. Velmara, queen of the Thrillin Empire, stood tall at the helm of the observation deck. Her silver-hued eyes scanned the planet below, her expression a mixture of curiosity and faint disdain. "This world is unrefined," she remarked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had ruled for centuries. Her advisor, Kralix, bowed slightly, his own pale features unreadable. "Yet it is rich in resources and untapped potential, Your Grace," he replied, his tone as smooth and calculated as the algorithms that powered their starships. Velmara said nothing, her gaze fixed on the sprawling greenery and azure oceans below. Earth was unlike any world she had seen, a planet teeming with life, chaos, and an energy she couldn't quite define. The Thrillin were a race of logic-driven beings, their society rooted in order and precision. Emotions were seen as primitive relics, useful only for understanding lesser species. Velmara herself had always dismissed the concept of love as a quaint myth, a distraction unworthy of her time. Yet, as she prepared to make her first diplomatic visit to Earth, something about this world stirred an unfamiliar unease within her. When the ship landed in a clearing surrounded by towering trees, a human delegation awaited them. Among the group was Dane, a botanist who had been chosen to represent humanity's ecological interests. His brown hair was tousled by the breeze, and his green eyes held a quiet intensity. Unlike the others, who wore tailored suits and practiced smiles, Dane seemed more grounded, his hands tucked into the pockets of his well-worn jacket. Velmara stepped onto Earth's soil with regal poise, her shimmering gown of woven starlight catching the sunlight. As she approached the humans, she noted their nervousness. Humans were always so expressive, emotions written plainly on their faces. It was both fascinating and exhausting. Dane observed her with quiet curiosity. The queen was unlike anything he had imagined. Her presence was commanding, her beauty almost otherworldly. But it was her eyes that captivated him most. They seemed to see everything, yet reveal nothing. "Queen Velmara," the lead diplomat began, his voice shaking slightly, "on behalf of humanity, we welcome you to Earth." Velmara inclined her head. "I accept your welcome. Let us hope this exchange is mutually beneficial." Her tone was measured, devoid of warmth or hostility. As formalities continued, Dane's gaze wandered to the flora surrounding the clearing. He couldn't help but marvel at how the natural world seemed to thrive despite humanity's best efforts to tame it. When his eyes returned to Velmara, he was surprised to find her watching him. "You are not like the others," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of introductions. Dane blinked, startled. Well, I'm not a diplomat," he replied, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm a botanist. Plants are my specialty." "Plants," Velmara repeated, as if testing the word. "You study the primitive life forms of your planet?" "Primitive?" Dane chuckled. "I wouldn't call them that. Plants are incredibly complex. They've been around far longer than we have, adapting and thriving in ways we're only beginning to understand." Velmara raised an elegant brow. "Interesting perspective. Most of your kind seem more interested in dominating their environment than understanding it." Dane shrugged. "Maybe that's why I'm here. Someone has to remind us what we're destroying." Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Perhaps there is more to your species than I anticipated." The conversation was brief, but it lingered in both their minds. Velmara found herself intrigued by the human's quiet conviction, while Dane couldn't shake the image of her piercing silver eyes. As the Thrillin delegation moved into their temporary quarters, Velmara glanced back at Dane. For the first time in centuries, she felt a flicker of something she couldn't name, a curiosity that refused to be ignored. And so, the queen of a race that had long dismissed emotions as trivial began to wonder if perhaps there was something more to the human experience after all. Velmara's quarters were a marvel of thrill and design, seamlessly integrated with the natural environment around them. The walls shimmered like liquid silver, adjusting their opacity to let in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. Yet, despite the beauty and comfort, Velmara found herself restless. Her conversation with the human botanist lingered in her thoughts. Dane. His words had carried a weight that most lacked, a passion she had never encountered among her own people. Velmara dismissed the thought, telling herself it was merely an academic curiosity. And yet, when the human delegation extended an invitation to explore Earth's wilderness, she found herself accepting without hesitation. The next day, Velmara stood at the edge of an ancient forest, her gown exchanged for a simpler, more practical Thrillin attire that shimmered like morning dew. Dane was waiting for her, a canvas satchel slung over his shoulder. He seemed as calm and unassuming as before, though there was a spark of excitement in his eyes. "You're actually coming," he said, his tone a mix of surprise and amusement. "I am," Velmara replied, her voice as steady as ever. "I wish to see this complexity you spoke of." Dane gestured toward the trail ahead. "Then let's get started." The forest was alive with sounds and colors that seemed almost overwhelming to Velmara's senses. Birds flitted from branch to branch, their songs weaving into a tapestry of sound. Leaves rustled in the gentle breeze, their green hues shimmering with sunlight. Insects buzzed in intricate patterns, their movements almost hypnotic. Dane led the way, pointing out various plants and their unique properties. "This is a fern," he said, brushing his fingers against the delicate fronds. "One of the oldest plant species on the planet. They've been around for over 300 million years." Velmara crouched beside him, her silver eyes studying the fern with newfound interest. "Your world values age as a sign of resilience?" "Not always," Dane admitted. "But I think there's something beautiful about things that endure, don't you?" Velmara hesitated, then nodded. "Perhaps." As they continued deeper into the forest, Dane's explanations grew more animated. He spoke of trees that communicated through root networks, flowers that adapted their colors to attract pollinators, and mushrooms that thrived in symbiotic relationships with other plants. Velmara listened intently, her initial skepticism giving way to genuine fascination. At one point, Dane stopped by a small clearing where sunlight streamed through the canopy, illuminating a cluster of wildflowers. He knelt and carefully plucked one, holding it out to Velmara. "This is a bluebell," he said. "Legend has it they're a symbol of humility and gratitude." Velmara took the flower, her fingers brushing against his. The contact was brief, but it sent an unfamiliar warmth through her. She examined the delicate petals, their vibrant blue hue unlike anything she had seen on her own world. "Humility," she repeated softly. "Your people value this?" Dane smiled. "Not enough, but we should. The world doesn't revolve around us, even if we like to think it does." Velmara's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Your perspective is unique, and yours is fascinating," Dane replied. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the forest's natural symphony filling the gaps between their words. Velmara found herself increasingly drawn to the simplicity of the moment. For a queen who had spent her life surrounded by protocol and logic, there was something liberating about simply being present. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the forest floor, Dane led Velmara to a small stream. The water sparkled like liquid crystal, its gentle babble soothing to the ear. "Why did you choose plants?" Velmara asked, her voice softer than usual. Dane hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess I've always felt more at home with them than with people. Plants don't judge. They don't hide their intentions. They just exist." Velmara studied him for a long moment. "You speak of them as if they are alive in ways your people are not." "Maybe they are," Dane said with a small smile. "They may not have emotions, but they respond to the world around them. They adapt, survive, and sometimes even thrive despite the odds. Kind of like you." The comparison caught Velmara off guard. "Me?" Dane nodded. You're curious, despite what your people say about emotions. You're willing to explore things they might dismiss. That's adaptation, isn't it? Velmara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out at the stream, her thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had always prided herself on her logic, her ability to rise above the chaos of feeling. And yet, here she was, feeling more connected to this human and his chaotic world than she ever had to her own kind. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Dane turned to Velmara with a gentle smile. There's a lot more I could show you, if you're interested. Velmara met his gaze, her silver eyes glinting with an emotion she couldn't quite name. I believe I would like that. And in that moment, the seeds of something extraordinary were planted, something that would challenge everything Velmara thought she knew about herself, her people, and the universe itself. You said, right? Section 3. ChatGPT said. ChatGPT. Section 3. The Queen's Confession. Night fell over the earth, blanketing the forest in a serene stillness. The Thrillin mothership hovered silently in the distance, a stark contrast to the natural beauty surrounding it. Velmara stood alone on a stone outcrop, the gentle hum of the ship faint in her ears. She had always found solace in solitude, but tonight her thoughts were anything but peaceful. Dane's words lingered, weaving themselves into her mind like tendrils of ivy. His passion for the living world, his humility in the face of its complexity, and the warmth in his gaze, all of it stirred something within her that she could neither name nor suppress. It was as if he had unlocked a part of her she hadn't known existed. The sound of footsteps on the forest floor pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Dane approaching, his silhouette outlined by the faint glow of the ship in the distance. Couldn't sleep? He asked, his voice low and calm. Thrillin do not require sleep in the way humans do, she replied, her tone neutral. Dane chuckled softly. Of course you don't. You're too logical for something as inefficient as rest. Velmara raised an eyebrow. And yet, here you are, awake in the middle of the night. He shrugged, stepping closer until he was standing beside her. Sometimes the world feels clearer at night, quieter. It's easier to think. They stood in silence for a moment, gazing out at the forest. The stars above glittered like scattered diamonds, their light reflecting in the gentle ripples of a nearby pond. Dane, Velmara said at last, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. Why do you feel so deeply for your world? For its plants, its creatures, even its imperfections? He glanced at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her question. I guess it's because I see how fragile it all is. How easy it would be to lose it if we're not careful. That makes it precious. Precious, Velmara repeated, as if testing the word. She turned to face him, her silver eyes searching his. My people do not understand such concept. We have always valued strength, logic, and efficiency. Emotions are seen as weaknesses, distractions from progress. And what do you think? Dane asked gently. Velmara hesitated, her composure faltering. I do not know, she admitted. But since coming to this planet, since meeting you, I have begun to question. Question what? Everything, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The way we live. The way we think. I have always believed that emotions were unnecessary, that they served no purpose. Yet, when I am with you, I feel. She trailed off, struggling to find the right words. Dane stepped closer, his green eyes soft and understanding. What do you feel? He asked, his tone encouraging. Velmara took a deep breath, her normally steady demeanor giving way to a flicker of uncertainty. I feel as though I am standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. It is exhilarating and terrifying all at once. You have awakened something in me that I cannot explain, something my people have long dismissed as a human myth. Dane's brow furrowed. You mean love? Velmara shook her head. No. Not love. At least, not yet. But something close. Something that defies the logic I have relied on my entire life. Dane smiled gently. That's the thing about emotions. They don't always make sense. But that doesn't mean they're not real. Velmara looked away, her gaze returning to the stars. Your kind speaks of the climax, the pinnacle of emotional and physical connection. My people have always believed it to be a fabrication, a primitive fantasy. But now I wonder, could it be real? Could it be something more than myth? It's real, Dane said softly. But it's not just about passion or desire. It's about connection, trust, vulnerability. It's two people opening themselves to each other completely, without fear or pretense. Velmara's heart, a part of her she had long ignored, seemed to stir at his words. And you have experienced this? She asked. Dane hesitated, his expression growing distant. Not in the way you're thinking. I've cared deeply for people before, but I don't think I've ever found that kind of connection. Not yet. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. Velmara's barriers, built over centuries of discipline and detachment, began to crack. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched Dane's arm. Your kind is so fragile, she murmured. Yet you endure. You feel. You create beauty from chaos. I do not understand it, but I want to. Dane placed his hand over hers, his touch warm and grounding. Then let me show you, he said softly. For the first time in her life, Velmara allowed herself to surrender to the unknown. And in that moment, standing under the stars with a human who had seen past her cold exterior, she realized that perhaps emotions were not a weakness after all. Would you like to continue with section? The following days saw Velmara and Dane spending more time together, exploring the intricate layers of Earth's ecosystems and, in turn, each other. The forest became their shared sanctuary, a place where the barriers of culture and species faded into the background. One afternoon, they found themselves by a tranquil lake, its surface reflecting the sky's brilliant hues. Velmara had removed her shoes, her bare feet dipping into the cool water. It was a simple act, but for someone who had spent a lifetime encased in the rigidity of duty, it felt almost rebellious. Dane sat beside her, skipping stones across the lake's surface. It's funny, he said, breaking the silence. I always thought aliens would be cold and distant like the movies portray. But you're different. Velmara glanced at him, her silver eyes thoughtful. Different how? You're curious, he said with a smile. Open-minded. You don't just observe, you want to understand. That's rare, even among humans? She tilted her head, considering his words. Curiosity is what brought me here. But you have made me question things I once believed immutable. Dane chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, she replied, her voice softer than usual. A breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Dane leaned back on his elbows, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. Do your people ever just enjoy the moment? He asked. Velmara frowned. What do you mean? Like this, he said, gesturing around them. Sitting by a lake, feeling the sun on your skin, listening to the world around you. No agenda, no purpose, just being. Velmara hesitated, the concept foreign to her. We do not have such luxuries. Every action must serve a purpose. Efficiency is the cornerstone of our existence. That sounds exhausting, Dane said, his tone light but sincere. It is simply the way of things, she replied, though there was a hint of doubt in her voice. Dane sat up, turning to face her. Maybe that's why you're here. To see that life doesn't have to be about efficiency. It can be messy and unpredictable and still have meaning. Velmara looked away, her gaze fixed on the rippling water. Your words challenge everything I have been taught. My people would call it weakness to indulge in such thoughts. But you don't think it's weakness, do you? Dane asked gently. Velmara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the water. No, she admitted finally. It feels liberating. They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that needed no words. For Velmara, it was a revelation. She had always believed silence to be a tool for contemplation, but now she understood it could also be shared, a bridge between two souls. Later that evening, Velmara invited Dane aboard the Thrillin ship. The humans had been granted limited access to its interior, but Dane was the first to be given such a personal invitation. He followed her through shimmering corridors that seemed to pulse with light, their design organic yet futuristic. "What is this material?" he asked, running a hand along the smooth, iridescent walls. "Quorath," Velmara explained. "It is a living alloy that responds to its environment and repairs itself when damaged." Dane whistled softly. "That's incredible. We've got nothing like this on Earth." "It is the product of millennia of research and refinement," she said, though there was no pride in her tone. She led him to a room filled with glowing orbs, each one suspended in midair. They pulsed gently, their light shifting in mesmerizing patterns. "This is our Hall of Memory," Velmara said. "Each orb contains the collective knowledge of a Thrillin mind." Dane's eyes widened. "You store memories like this?" "Yes. When a Thrillin passes, their essence is preserved here, ensuring that their experiences are never lost." Dane stepped closer, marveling at the orbs. "It's beautiful. But doesn't it make things impersonal?" Velmara frowned. "How so?" "Well," he said, choosing his words carefully, "memories are more than just data. They're tied to emotions, to the connections we make with others. Storing them like this feels disconnected." Velmara regarded him thoughtfully. "Perhaps you are right. Our approach values knowledge over connection. But I have begun to wonder if we have overlooked something vital." Dane turned to her, his expression serious. "You're starting to see it, aren't you? That emotions aren't a weakness. They're what make life worth living." Velmara held his gaze, her silver eyes reflecting the light of the orbs. "You speak with such conviction," she said. "It is compelling." He smiled. "I guess it's because I believe it. And maybe, deep down, you do too." Velmara felt a strange warmth in her chest, a sensation she was slowly beginning to understand. Dane had shown her a world she had never imagined, a world filled with complexity, beauty, and contradictions. And for the first time, she allowed herself to embrace the uncertainty. As they stood together in the glow of the memory hall, Velmara reached out and placed her hand over Dane's. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. "Perhaps you are right," she said softly. "Perhaps there is more to life than logic." Dane squeezed her hand gently. "We'll figure it out together." And in that moment, surrounded by the echoes of countless lifetimes, the first fragile bonds of something extraordinary began to take shape. The next morning, Velmara awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the forest canopy. She had stayed on Earth longer than planned, her usual routine abandoned in favor of Dane's world of unstructured beauty. It was unlike her to stray from schedules, but something about these moments, simple, unhurried, felt transformative. Nearby, Dane was crouched by the riverbank, his hands submerged in the clear water as he washed a handful of ripe berries he'd gathered. He turned and caught her watching, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Caught me stealing breakfast," he teased, holding up the berries as evidence. Velmara rose and approached him, her steps deliberate. "Are these safe for consumption?" "Only the best," he assured her, offering one. She took the berry between her fingers, inspecting it with a scientist's scrutiny before placing it in her mouth. The burst of flavor startled her, sweet, tangy, and utterly foreign. "It is delightful," she admitted, her expression softening. "Nature's gift," Dane said with a wink. Their playful exchange was interrupted by a sudden, low hum in the air. Velmara's serene expression shifted to one of concern as she turned toward the horizon. The sound grew louder, more insistent, until a Thrillin reconnaissance drone descended through the trees. The drone's sleek, metallic form hovered before Velmara, its blue lights scanning her. Then a voice emanated from it, cold, formal, and unmistakably Thrillin. "Queen Velmara, your extended absence has raised concerns among the Council. You are ordered to return to the ship immediately for debriefing." Velmara's jaw tightened. I am aware of my responsibilities. Inform the Council that I will return shortly. The drone hesitated, as if considering her words, before emitting a brief acknowledgement tone and ascending into the sky. Dane watched it go, a frown creasing his brow. They don't trust you being here, do they? No, Velmara admitted. To them, this planet is merely a resource, and I am straying too far from my mission. Dane's gaze met hers, his expression serious. And what do you think? Velmara hesitated, her usual certainty faltering. I think this planet has shown me truths I never expected to find. Truths that challenge the foundation of my people's beliefs. Then maybe that's why you're here, Dane said softly. To find a new path. Hours later, Velmara stood before the Council in the grand chamber of the Thrillin ship. The advisors' expressions were as unyielding as ever, their disapproval palpable. You have spent an inordinate amount of time among the humans, one of them began, his tone sharp. Your duties to the Thrillin people must take precedence. I have not neglected my duties, Velmara replied evenly. In fact, my interactions with the humans have provided valuable insights. Insights? Another advisor scoffed. You mean distractions? Emotions cloud judgment, Velmara. You risk compromising our mission. Velmara's eyes narrowed. Is it compromise to seek understanding? To explore what it means to feel? The eldest advisor leaned forward, his expression grave. Your attachment to the human, Dane, is evident. Such a connection is dangerous. It weakens you. Velmara's voice rose, her frustration breaking through. You speak of weakness, but it is your refusal to adapt that endangers us. The Thrillin way has brought us far, but it is not infallible. There is strength in connection, in emotion. I have seen it with my own eyes. The chamber fell silent, her words echoing in the vast space. The advisors exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance. Finally, the eldest advisor spoke again. You are our queen, Velmara. Your judgment has guided us for centuries. But emotions are unpredictable, volatile. They threaten the stability we have worked so hard to maintain. Velmara's gaze swept over the Council, her voice steady and resolute. Perhaps it is time for that stability to be challenged. Without change, there can be no growth. Later that night, Velmara found herself standing at the edge of the forest, gazing up at the stars. The confrontation with the Council had left her feeling both empowered and conflicted. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Dane approaching. His presence was a balm to her troubled mind. You okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I am uncertain, she admitted. The Council sees my actions as a threat. But I cannot ignore what I have learned here. Dane stepped closer, his green eyes searching hers. What do you want, Velmara? Not what your people want or what your mission requires. What do you want? Velmara's breath caught at the question, so simple yet so profound. I want to understand, she said, her voice trembling. To feel. To live, not as a queen, but as myself. Dane reached out, his hand brushing hers. Then let yourself have that. You don't have to choose between your people and what you found here. Maybe there's a way to bring them together. Velmara looked at him, hope flickering in her silver eyes. Do you truly believe that is possible? I believe in you, he said firmly. And I believe that if anyone can bridge the gap between two worlds, it's you. Her heart swelled at his words, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope, not just for herself, but for something greater. As they stood beneath the endless sky, the bond between them grew stronger, a testament to the power of connection and the courage to defy the odds. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Velmara found herself standing at a crossroads, torn between the expectations of her people and the uncharted path that Dane had awakened within her. The bond between them grew stronger, undeniable and profound, but the weight of her responsibilities loomed over her like a shadow. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the forest, Velmara and Dane stood by the river where they had first met. The sound of the water rushing over the rocks was soothing, but the air between them was heavy with unspoken words. "I've been thinking," Velmara began, her voice quiet yet resolute. "About what lies ahead." Dane turned to her, his expression earnest. "And my people will not accept this," she said, gesturing between them. "They fear change. They see emotions as a threat to our survival." "And what do you see?" Dane asked gently. Velmara hesitated, then met his gaze. "I see the possibility of something greater. Of a future where logic and emotion coexist. But to pursue that future, I must risk everything I have built." Dane stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "Velmara, the best things in life are worth the risk. But it's your choice. Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you." Her chest tightened at his words, the sincerity in his voice piercing through her doubts. For so long she had carried the weight of leadership alone, but now she realized she didn't have to bear it all. The next day, Velmara called a meeting with the council. The advisors gathered in the grand chamber, their faces etched with concern as they awaited her decision. "I have listened to your counsel," Velmara began, her voice steady but firm. "I understand your fears and your reservations. But I cannot ignore what I have learned on this planet." One of the advisors leaned forward, his tone wary. "And what have you learned, Queen Velmara?" "That strength lies not in isolation but in connection," she said. "That emotions, while unpredictable, can inspire resilience and innovation. And that humanity, despite its flaws, holds a key to our evolution." The council exchanged uneasy glances, murmuring among themselves. "You mean to suggest that we adopt their ways?" one advisor asked, his tone incredulous. "I mean to suggest that we find a balance," Velmara replied. "We have much to offer each other, if only we are willing to listen." The eldest advisor spoke, his voice tinged with skepticism. "And what of your bond with the human? Do you believe it will not cloud your judgment?" Velmara straightened, her gaze unwavering. "My bond with Dane has not clouded my judgment, it has clarified it. He has shown me the value of vulnerability, of trust, and I will not deny the truth of what we have found." The chamber fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. Finally, the eldest advisor sighed. "Your path is unorthodox, Velmara. But you are our queen. If this is the course you believe will secure our future, we will follow." Later that evening, Velmara stood at the edge of the ship's landing platform, the forest below illuminated by the soft glow of the vessel's lights. Dane joined her, his presence grounding her in the moment. "How did it go?" he asked, his tone cautious. "They have agreed to support my decision," Velmara said, though there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "But it is only the beginning. There will be challenges ahead." Dane smiled, his green eyes warm. "We'll face them together." Velmara turned to him, her silver eyes shimmering with emotion. "You have given me something I never thought possible, Dane. A reason to hope. A reason to believe." He reached out, taking her hands in his. "And you've shown me what it means to be truly brave. To dream of something bigger than yourself." For a moment they simply stood there, the stars above and the world below bearing witness to their connection. Then, with a quiet determination, Velmara made her choice. "I will stay," she said softly. "Not just for my people, but for us. For the possibility of a future where we can bridge the gap between our worlds." Dane's smile widened, his relief palpable. "You won't regret it. I promise." In the weeks that followed, Velmara and Dane worked tirelessly to foster understanding between their species. They faced resistance, from both humans and Thrillans, but their shared determination never wavered. Through their efforts, a fragile alliance began to form, built on trust and the hope of a brighter future. Velmara's ship became a symbol of unity, a place where humans and Thrillans could come together and learn from one another. And amidst the chaos and challenges, Velmara and Dane's bond only deepened. They found solace in each other, their love a beacon of light in uncertain times. One night, as they stood on the ship's observation deck, gazing out at the stars, Dane wrapped an arm around Velmara's shoulders. "Do you think they'll write stories about us someday?" he asked with a grin. Velmara smiled, leaning into him. Perhaps. But if they do, I hope they remember the truth. And what's that? That even the greatest differences can be overcome, she said softly. When we dare to open our hearts. As the stars shimmered above, Velmara and Dane shared a quiet moment of peace, their love a testament to the power of connection and the courage to defy the odds. Theirs was a story of hope, a story that had only just begun.